Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inner Voice Show, Heartfelt Chat with me, Dr. Foojan. So great to be with you. I'm a psychotherapist and author and the originator of the Awareness Integration Theory. Our conversation is about what matters most in your life: our minds, our thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships, and our fulfillment in this beautiful journey of life. Many of you have asked about my latest book, and I want to share those with you. So, the latest book that has been out at this time, it's called Intentional Parenting: The Practical Guide to Awareness Integration Theory, with two of my amazing colleagues, Dr. Nicole Jaffari and Dr. Eileen Manoukian. You can find this on my website or Amazon. Go to foojanzeine.com or Amazon. This book is for parents, for educators, for teachers, whoever is working with children. We go through every single age group: infancy, toddler, child, school age, and preteen, teen, and young adults, and share with you how to be with your child from the cognitive level, from the developmental stages, from emotional developmental stages, and how to work with your children or children you're working with and teaching from the awareness integration methodology. For all of you therapists and coaches who are interested in learning about awareness integration therapy, this is the book. The Awareness Integration Therapy: Clear the Past, Create a New Future, and Live a Fulfilled Life. And we do have certification programs with different types of courses. So you go to awarenessintegration.com or go ahead and go to Amazon, anywhere, and you can find not only the book, but if you go to my website, you will also find all of the courses that are coming up in 2023 to get the certification courses, so that you can be a provider for this type of model. In this episode, I'm excited to chat with Dr. Amy Mednick. She's a psychiatrist, and she has her own private practice. She received her medical degree with distinction in research from Albert Einstein College of Medicine and a Bachelor of Science in Brain and Cognitive Sciences from MIT. She specializes in the overlap between the humanities and neuroscience and leads a lecture series for psychiatric residents in training, social workers, and psychology trainees. She's been involved in both brain research and linguistics, and authored articles in clinical psychiatry news, and we're going to be talking about her latest book, humanizing humanizing the remote experience through leadership and coaching. Strategize for better virtual connection. And you can get her book at htre-book.com. I think we have an amazing conversation about what do you do when you are in virtual space all day, whether it's business or you're doing mental health, or you're teaching, or you're in classes, wherever you are. It's just there is so much more that takes from us, from our brain, our cognitive abilities, our attention, focus, physical body, to do this all day. So she tells you in her book in what happens to your body, what happens to your brain, and what you can do. So it's exciting it was exciting for me and very knowledgeable to have a conversation with her and actually read her book. So I think that you will enjoy her. Subscribe to this podcast and YouTube channel, and connect with me through my website, foojanzeine.com, or any of the social medias. If you want to just read about and go through like a workbook of the awareness integration therapy, again, my book, Life Reset, which goes through every area of life with you, and teaches you every aspect of how to become aware, how to integrate, how to create envisioning concepts for the future. And research has shown that it has decreased depression and anxiety, and has boosted self-esteem and self-confidence. And I hope that you really enjoy working with it. I love to hear from you. I mean, let me know your process, what you like about the books, and what topics you want us to work with. And I just love to hear from you. So contact me. And now we're ready. Here is Dr. Amy Mednick. Well, welcome to the show, Dr. Amy Mednick.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, absolutely. You have a book out, Humanizing the Remote Experience Through Leadership and Coaching, Strategize for Better Virtual Connection. Oh my God, how much we need this. You've written this with your co-author, Diane Leonard. It has been an amazing transition for most of us. I started with doing psychotherapy online. I wrote one of the first books on online therapy in around 2005, which we were mostly going and doing chat, and then it was the video. But I remember that I moved and I wanted for my clients to do, online virtual therapy. And they're like, no, I don't want to. I want this essence of being in the room with you and all of it. And so it really took a long time. And then COVID came, and that was the only way to do this. And a lot of our experience changed, right? We went to school. Every child went to a Zoom meeting, regardless of their age. I teach college students right now on Zoom. It's such an odd experience to have only names and dark spaces with only at times voices coming out. And you wrote beautifully in your book about how our brain works, what does it need, and how it's trying to handle this type of shift that has been put upon us, that although it has created this amazing connection across the world for us and created efficiency in interactions, and then yet it has created so much more aloneness and not but sense of belonging and confusion and isolation and all of it. So please share with us.
Yes, I would love to. And it's a good introduction to it, to talk about things like therapy and things like classrooms, because this is amazing, right? This is a brave new world. This is like, we have so much new access, we have so much convenience, and everything is great. And we have these, you and I were doing therapy online, and we're getting to talk to people who may not have been able to make it to our office, or would have had to put their kids in childcare, or, so many reasons that it is easy to get to us, and our students as well. And I've done Zoom teaching as well. It's very odd. It's very much like talking to yourself until you just convince your students they must leave their cameras, and lately microphones too, because I want to hear background noise, or I feel like I'm alone in a room. Anyway, so we have our students who can join us from wherever. So, this is a wonderful thing. There's many benefits. So we don't want to, COVID things are better, so we're coming back in person. But we're not gonna throw it all away, because there's so many good things about it. And so the book really wasn't about saying the bad things about it. It was saying just, we are living this way. We are working this way. It's here to stay in some form. So if we're going to do it anyway, how can we do it better? How can we do it in a way that preserves our humanity and preserves our connection, and is good for us and keeps us together? So the way we kind of went about figuring that out was, and this is kind of the way I think as a scientist, look for the problem. And, as a doctor, like, where's the problem? Where's the pathology? Like, what's wrong? So, we kind of looked a lot at things that a lot of people were experiencing ourselves in our, my work and my co-authors' work, and our clients and our patients, and kind of pinpoint some of the big problems, things like extreme fatigue, Zoom fatigue, problems with attention, general mood problems, things like this. And we really looked hard to figure out why. Why were those happening in particular? What was the reason? And kind of, could we identify some warning signs to kind of trace back the root of why these things are happening? And we were able to do that and kind of break it down into these three main needs that we focused on, sort of as the biggest needs that are not being met in this particular arena. And so when we said needs, humans are kind of hardwired with these needs, hardwired with things that we have to get, right? So we have to get food. So we have this hardwiring that makes us hungry when we don't have food, and alerts us that this is missing. I need to go find it. So we have these same needs for our social stuff as well, for our social needs. And that's because we're social creatures. We need people around. This is how we were designed. We're, as infants, we're helpless. We must be programmed from day one to get people to be around us, stay around us, feel distress if they're not around us. And all of that infant wiring, doesn't go away. It's still there in some form. And so the needs that we focused on, one was at a more basic level, the need for safety. How does that require, how does that operate online? How does that kind of work when people are not exactly around? The second need that we look at is the need for understanding, need to just understand other people, understand what they're saying and what they mean and what their intentions are, how our brains are designed for that, and how it really doesn't work that great in 2D. And how that kind of leads to a lot of fatigue. And then the third need that we look at is the need for belonging, which is a little more overt. Need to be a part of something, need to be part of a group. How does that fall flat? How does that sometimes not get served? And so by looking at the kind of warning signs for each of these needs not being met, you can sort of trace back, where's my problem? Where's things falling flat for me in the remote experience? And of course, that's the first step to being able to fix anything, is knowing why you're suffering, why you're not feeling great, rather than just doing your back-to-back Zoom meetings, shutting your laptop, walking away, and, going to your Netflix and not really certain why you're not feeling that great overall.
So you talked about the need for safety is obviously a priority, and each human being, as they enter this virtual connection spaces, one of the first things that they try to do is to establish safety. And how do you see the best way to establish safety as you go into a meeting, as you go into a business meeting? Whether you are with one individual, how do you create that? And then regardless whether you're with a group, because one of the important factors that you said in your book is that when we are together, there's so many cues that we get from each other, from the body language, from the tonality, from the amount of information that is in the space, kind of like the brain synchronicity that we connect, the energies that connect. It's a wealth of information that at times creates our safety. The way we position ourselves, that we don't have to look, especially face to face. Sometimes we are together close, and then we're doing an activity together, and creates that bonding. Especially male bonding happens a lot like that, right? They're together doing something versus like we're just sitting there looking at each other, which they might not create that type of safety. What are your suggestions that when people enter this environment, regardless of reason, whether they're students or for mental health or they're doing family visits on Zoom, or they're doing business meetings, high level negotiations. What is the best way to create some safety?
Mhm. Yeah, so that question kind of hits on all the different levels that we look at this at, because the basic need for safety is that's sort of we consider that kind of on a very basic level. You have this fight or flight system, you have this threat system to look out for problems, and it's calmed down when there are other people around. That's a sign that things are okay. So if you're on Zoom calls with people all day and there's faces on the Brady Bunch screen, does the question we ask is, does your brain actually know that people are there? Because it doesn't really talk in Zoom language, so does it really believe that you're with people all day long? And for some people, yes, and that connection and the talking is enough, and they have enough kind of on the outside of the computer that they can sort of get that met. But for other people that aren't kind of getting that met, the way that's going to show up is your threat system is a little bit activated. You might not really know why. Might not know why you're feeling hypervigilant or on edge. You're just in work meetings. You've been working with these people forever. Like, what's the big deal? But if you're hypervigilant, if you're on threat alert, what that's going to translate into is not being able to pay attention, because when your attention is focused on survival, it does all the resources we know get diverted away from higher functioning and thinking and complex thinking and things like that. So if that's what you're dealing with, then we know that your basic need is not being met and you're having a stress response. So at that first level, you got to resolve the stress response. You can't just work through it. You can't push through it. And that goes back to basic self-care things that we know that we talk about all the time. We just don't always talk about why exactly we need them. But simple things like deep breathing and taking breaks and being in nature, even looking at nature, things that resolve the stress cycle are going to get you to that not hypervigilant place, so that you can feel okay and engage in the meeting. That's if you're on your own. Even better, if you're noticing all the time, if you're feeling hypervigilant, if you're feeling lonely, even though there's people there, also, there's recognizing that this is not enough, and go outside and meet up with someone, or even just, it doesn't have to be a meetup. Sometimes I think when we're Zooming all the time, like even going and buying coffee from someone and having, like you said, that actual eye contact and that actual joint attention on a thing and a shared smile, like sometimes that's just a little boost that's enough to recharge that part of things that are missing. And that's really on a very individual level. We can look at things on a team level also, and that's more of your need for belonging, your need to be a part of a group, where that can sort of be missed when you guys are all meeting together. You're all on the same screen, but you're not like literally on the same page. So that's something more that leaders can look at. Are their team members feeling safe? That's talking more a little about psychological safety, which is the concept of just having a group environment where you feel free to make mistakes, you feel free to ask questions and take risks. That's really been shown to be essential for good functioning and among teams. The key elements for establishing psychological safety, based on a lot of research, are that people get equal turn taking. Actually, is shown to be more important than many other things. That everyone kind of has an equal chance to speak, and that everyone kind of, what they call emotional sensitivity, everyone is kind of aware of how you feel, kind of has some grasp of it. So those are key elements of psychological safety, which is a key element of feeling good and having a successful team. Both harder when our meetings are virtual. So those are kind of two things that leaders can do more deliberately. There are definitely ways to be deliberate about making sure everyone can talk. Like sometimes it's easier on Zoom because we do have to take turns. So just checking in with people, making sure that's happening, and being more deliberate about the ways that we do that.
Mm-hmm. In your book, you also talk about the 6 key processes that make attention possible.
Mm,
And you share with us in detail about the first 2 are a little bit more mental and cognitive, which are being alert, alerting, and orienting.
mhm,
And then the other 4 are a little bit more kind of like action oriented, which is prioritizing, ignoring, switching, and sustaining. And
mhm,
um, and you share with us that successful paying attention requires these levels. So it's like you're alert, so you're not kind of too sleepy or worked up. That your orientation is with that frequent, like you're not, going all over the place, that you
mhm,
have the space around you solid enough that you could pay attention. And I think part of what had happened with people who around COVID time had to have their kids at school. Kids were doing
mhm,
homeschooling. They were working from home, so they were like 3 or 4 people doing different things in the same environment. And if their home didn't have all of those private spaces to be able to do that, it was very, very hard to be able to not be disoriented by 110 other different things that are happening. And um, I know myself when I'm sitting here, my dog barks, or he wants to come on my lap, or the doorbell rings suddenly, or, there's a noise somewhere. And all of these things kind of like constantly are taking you away versus the time that I'm actually in my office. The whole surrounding of an office building is quiet and is, systematized that way. So it takes a lot more sometimes for us to be able to hold a solid attention. You're talking about prioritizing items in working memory and then selecting which ones, and the ability to ignore the irrelevant ones and kind of like assess which one is irrelevant, and
mhm.
then switch back to what you need to be able to do in order to pay attention and then sustain it kind of for a prolonged time. And for many of these tasks, I think it's so important. I've noticed that when I'm visually, at least with someone, although, in another part of your book, you do say that visually it overloads us more, but I can pay more attention when I'm with you visually versus if I'm not, and it's just auditory, that I find myself doing different things, and kind of like break away my attention into a couple of different tasks versus just focusing on someone's face, and being there with them. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, you sum it up really well, these processes of attention. And the reason that we go into so much depth on what's involved is to really point that out, that there is so much involved, that this is it's extremely complex, more than we know and more than we could even imagine. So that's why we kind of just, do what you said. We do this, we do that at the same time. We're just in and out, we're doing all these different things. Um, and that begins to take a toll. We can understand that best when we understand how much goes into it, how much is required of our brain, that we need to alerting, like you said, is really coming back to that fight or flight response. We need to be in a good, safe, calm place to even start this attention process. The orienting for me is a lot about orienting is coming back. Orienting is where am I supposed to be? And when someone's at a podium, that's really easy. When there's someone speaking to you, standing behind a podium, people are whispering a little bit around you, someone's far, far away, there's construction making a noise, no one's paying attention to it. That's easy. That's obvious. We all understand what to do. We flatten that, and it's really hard. And it's hard for your brain to know where exactly it's supposed to point. And the harder things are, the more work your brain is doing. And that's where we get into the Zoom fatigue stuff, is even though we don't realize how much goes into attention, we're using, all burning all cylinders, or whatever you say it. And so we're doing more work than we usually would, because all of these things take a lot of work, and we take for granted what happens when we're in a quiet office building and sitting at our desk. When we're there, this process of sustaining it comes pretty naturally. Sustaining is just kind of the ideal. It's focused attention on the task you want to be focused on for a significant amount of time. That's the goal, and that's where we want to be. It's hard. It's hard in any it's hard in any situation. It's harder for some people than other people. The opposite of that, the opposite of sustaining your attention, is switching, is what you described, doing this and then looking over at that and then answering the text and then checking the email real quick and then just kind of bounce it, letting, you're listening, right? You're listening to the meeting pretty much. You have it in one earbud or whatever, but you're letting your attention bounce all over the place. And it's another one of those things that we do because we can, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing. And every switch that we make actually has a cost, has an energy cost every time you switch your attention from one thing to another. That's why it can be fatal in cars, in driving situations, when you're not paying attention to the road. That extra time that it takes to switch from what you were looking at to the road can sometimes be a terrible thing. So, I think the bottom line is that we think we can multitask. We can't. The brain actually can't multitask. The brain can do one task at a time, with a few exceptions. You can walk and talk, because walking is, you're not really thinking about it consciously. But for the most part, when we think we're multitasking and doing a lot of different things, we're not. We're switching. We're switching from one thing to the other and then back to the other thing. And there's a cost to that. There's an energy cost. There's a cost to the quality of what we're actually doing and to the connections that we're having with each other. So, I'm hoping that by appreciating the complexity of this, understanding what each of these processes are that come together to pay attention, that you can start to see, what am I doing too much of? What am I doing too little of? Where can I optimize this, with the goal getting towards sustaining attention? And then, of course, we draw attention to why each of these is harder in the remote experience. Doesn't mean doesn't mean we have to change everything, but when we're aware that it's harder, what can we do? There's little things we can do that make a big difference, because every little cost that you bring down takes away from that final, sum of energy that we're burning all day long and exhausting ourselves.
Yes. Dr. Amy Mednick, everyone. The book is called Humanizing the Remote Experience Through Leadership and Coaching: Strategies for Better Virtual Connection. Now let's talk about some of the suggestions that we could that you do give in your book about what to do so that you could be doing this process more efficiently and more taking care of yourself, in a sense. And so you have a couple of chapters about wellness. So the first thing that showed up for me is I have gotten backache and a sciatic pain because I sit all day long, and sometimes I am on Zoom working with a client, and then, or a meeting like this, and then the next one comes into the waiting room of Zoom waiting for me. And at times I don't even have time to get up. Like when I'm in my office, at least I get up. Every client that comes in, I go to the door and bring them in and sit down and then get up and take them. So, when you're in an office, you walk around, you go places. I found myself at times sitting for 4 to 6 hours, almost like straight, like back to back, and just barely have a drink, go to get my like a coffee or a tea, or run to the bathroom and come back. And then by the end of the night, I find my body stiff, exhausted. And so you talk about wellness in a way of how to, exercise and how to be there with your body when you have been, it's a system of just sitting and doing nothing. I mean, you're doing something, but your physical body for a long time. We talk about, sleep and important factors of, the food intake and everything that can really support you to hold yourself in a healthy place. So can you share a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. We, really identify wellness as key to engagement if you're not in a good place mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, then it's going to be really difficult to be engaged in whatever it is you're doing. And that goes for body and mind, right? So everything that with your body, it's more obvious. What's obvious to you, what you're doing to your back without moving all day long. But the same things are happening with your mind, and with, getting tired and burning out and all of these kind of things. And so the more, part of humanizing their own experience is taking care of yourself, because if you're not in a good place physically and mentally, then it's going to be, all of this hard stuff is going to be so much harder. It's going to be really unlikely that we can form the connections that we need, and that we can do these things that we need to do. So it really starts with maintaining wellness, in order to have an engaged mind. I'd say one of the biggest things, and you alluded to this, one of the biggest parts of maintaining wellness while working remotely is taking breaks. I think it came across in our research as really one of the strongest predictors of good performance and good health, and good productivity. Like famous minds throughout history, they have this thing in common, that they had blocks of work and then they took breaks. We don't do that because of this waiting room problem. I do the same thing. If someone's in the virtual waiting room, waiting for me, I click go as soon as, I don't want to make them wait, so it's so easy. It's just right there. It's a click. It's amazing what we do some days, right? Where just, you're talking to one person and then you just click and you switch and you're talking to a completely, yeah, it's, mind boggling it's already hard cognitive work what we do. And so this, to switch from one to the other is so much. And yeah, I think in the office, you would probably even, for some reason, I think it was okay to take a minute at your desk before you went to get them out of the waiting room. I don't know, because they were there, because they were comfortable, because you both knew where you were. We just really, we don't do it. And that's going to take a toll. Some great research by some performance psychologists really looked at how do athletes perform the best, what separates athletes, and they found it was really more contingent on what they did between matches or sets or whatever. We're looking at tennis players. What differentiated the really good ones from the less good ones was how well they used their downtime and their breaks. And they were the ones that concluded that, this was Jim Lohr and Tony Schwartz, that for every 90 to, let's say about 90 minutes of hard work of any kind, you need 15 to 20 minutes of downtime. And so we found that that's an essential thing to remember, and that we have to drill into our brains when we're working remotely, because we don't do it because we can go for 8 hours straight at these computers. But it doesn't mean that we should. So that's kind of an overarching goal strategy, to really focus on what you're doing in your downtimes and to take breaks. And then to use your body, especially when we're sitting hunched over the computer. It's not natural. So obvious, things like exercise, we know is important. But it doesn't, if you can't squeeze in an exercise routine, it doesn't mean you can't stand up and walk around. If you take a break, or if you walk around in nature or any type of natural scene, several studies have shown that is better for you. It calms your amygdala down a little bit more. People in studies were more cognitively engaged after taking a break in nature versus the comparison group that was like walking down a city street during their break. So that's an easy thing that can boost the effect even more. If you are taking your breaks like you should. And that can be going out in nature, or actually the effect has even been shown for looking at nature. So if you don't have any trees near you, even looking at it on a picture is better than not. Yeah, the reason you mentioned food, like, of course we should eat well, but more than that, I emphasize just thinking about even the way you eat, right? So if you're just kind of snacking throughout the day, if you're just grabbing something because you have a minute between meetings, if you're not really ever stopping, you're just kind of feeding yourself as you keep working. What kind of message is that sending to your brain? Someone who's running from a tiger in the, in the caveman days, they don't have time to stop and eat, right? They're running, their stress alert is high, their fight or flight is high, so their digestive system doesn't get any resources. If you are sitting and like closing your computer for a minute and just letting yourself eat your lunch, what kind of message does that send? Is that something that someone does who's in a lot of danger? No, they don't sit and just focus on their food because they've got to, run, finish. So these are like small signals you can send your brain to just to say like, okay, everything's fine. We're taking care of ourselves right now. And this is for me. It sounds little, but these go so easily when our home is our work. We may be working, out of the kitchen or right next to it. So it's so easy to just kind of let everything blend together and do everything and go. But all of these things, and we list a lot more strategies in the book, are really, essential to pick a few and give them to yourself so you can maintain your wellness. You're going to work better that way. You're not going to burn out. You're going to lead others better and lead by example too.
So one of the most important thing that I'm hearing from you is to create a structure. That structure is fitting for this new way of being necessarily, because we always created a structure about, where to go, how to handle traffic, go to the office, and everything had its own ritual, right? First you get into an office and what you do. Right now, I think we have a different types of ritual. So even, for example, as I speak with you, there are signals that are coming that, I have a text or I have an email or I have a whatever. So coming back and, as you say, keep reorienting, for example, to what we're talking about. But a corner of my eye sees that, and there's this thing of, oh, I got to get to this. So what happens is, for example, when we're done, automatically, instead of me getting up and, stretching and doing something that I can get myself ready, automatically I go, because I know that my emails are waiting, my texts are waiting, all of those are waiting. So then you can find yourself, going into that. And then by the time you're done with doing some of that, then the next, it's time to go to the next client. So if I'm not disciplining myself to take care of my body and these breaks that you're talking about, being with the technology that is all encompassing. So it's your socialization, it's your work, it's your information, it's the news, it's every single thing comes through, either your phone or your, monitors. So it has its way of just holding you, unless you discipline yourself in a systematic way to keep letting it go, take care of yourself, come back. And part of the taking care, not only it's your body and refocusing and breathing and kind of like, coming back to your center, but also, as you mentioned in your book, to include some of this has to be actual human contact with other people. So that maybe in the middle, you get up and go and get a coffee or talk to someone who is around you, or, get out to go where there's human being, or make sure that in the afternoon when you're done with work, that you create some social, if you're living alone and you're not, with your maid or children and all that, to create some social context that you could be with people. And so you're balancing kind of your life all around. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's essential, and it's something we have to fight for, because even though the technology is wonderful and it lets us be connected and it gives us so much, there was just a way that we used to be, that some of this stuff happened more naturally. When you were driving home from this, from the city where you worked, you had an hour in the car, and even say before cell phones, like you just had an hour where you had to not do anything. You just were forced to. Now, nobody wants to commute. We don't want that back, right? But we gave up the hour where you had to just zone out, not think about anything. We gave that up, and we didn't replace it with an hour of, relaxing that doesn't include rush hour traffic. There was a lot more, I think, that used to be built in that would force us to do it. The same thing with the nighttime. I think for a lot of occupations, medicine among them, 10 or 20 years ago, once you were out of the office, you were out, you'd address it the next day. That's long gone, right? We all can access our work all hours of the night. We can be reached. And again, that really doesn't mean we should. And that's a big thing that I emphasize in the book and with my patients is you have to shut the door if there is no actual door. You have to end it and end the day, and we check, like you just said, like, oh, just look at it real quick. But like, you look at it real quick and like, your body's back in it. Your stress response is back in it. There's no such thing as looking at it real quick when you're in, at home mode and winding down mode. So, I definitely emphasize and recommend, rituals. Like you say, rituals are essential. That's how you get yourself to keep doing these things. End of day rituals are so important because we don't have the built-in ritual of the commute and the whatever was involved for you in that. So you need to replace it. You need your own end of day ritual instead, because otherwise the day doesn't ever quite end. It just kind of trails off and you're kind of always in it and your brain's always kind of in it. So I encourage people to come up with something. Often when I have patients who work from home, I try to get them to, get up in the morning, take a shower, get dressed as if you were going to work, and then go outside and walk around the block. Make that your walk to work, come back home, sit down, do your work all day long, and then walk, go outside and do your walk home from work. Or I don't know. It's hard to do. It feels silly, but it's a really good idea. Anything you could do in your home that would kind of give your brain that message that that's work and this is home, even if it's moving space, and being somewhere else. But those end of day rituals, they work, and they have been shown to send those signals to your brain saying this part is done. We don't have to worry about this part anymore. Now we're on the next part. Otherwise if you just stay in it forever, we're just talking like chronic stress response, and it's not making you do better work. It's not making you productive in the long run, because if you don't have wellness, then there's only so long you're going to go before you burn out.
Exactly. And it brings your efficiency down.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Amy Mednick, everyone, humanizing the remote experience through leadership and coaching strategies for better virtual connections. Dr. Amy Mednick has co-authored this book with Diane Leonard. Dr. Mednick, anything we haven't shared that you would like everyone to know?
I would say just kind of the bottom line and important theme throughout my book and my work that I do is just encouraging everyone to remember that what's going on in here in our bodies and our brains, it's so complex. It's so like unthinkably complex. We, even scientists have only kind of scratched the surface of understanding what's going on. We think we know because we have these great conscious thinking minds. We think we know how we feel and what's going on in our bodies, but it's just important to remember there's so much that happens unconsciously. There's so much that we don't know is happening, that we don't realize is happening until it's manifesting in a completely different, unrelated symptom. So I think it's just important to know that and to start to explore what else might be going on and to give yourself grace and patience, because your brain's doing the best that it can.
Wonderful. Everyone, you can get the book at htre-book.com. htre-book.com. Thank you so much for the time you've allowed to be with us and share about your book.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great talking to you.
And for everyone out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.